Hey everybody, how's it going? Thank you for joining me this evening. I've got some very cool guests on the stream tonight, which I think you'll really enjoy. Of course, this is mostly a politics channel, but I try to mix in culture. We've had, authors on, we've talked about different books, we've talked about movies. But one thing I haven't really gotten into is music, and I was able to reach out to a band that I really enjoy. I'm a big fan of metal, particularly power metal, and I got recommended this band, Judicator, and I started listening, and I really got into it. And they were kind enough to join me tonight. So I have the singer of Judicator, John, and I have their drummer, Jordy. They're both here this evening with me. So, gentlemen, thanks for joining me on the stream tonight.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, I'm excited, man. Thank you.
Absolutely. So, I guess the best thing to do is to start off from the beginning. I always like to ask everybody kind of the same question, and of course, it'll definitely be important for for you guys. How did this band come together? I think, a little bit that like the first two albums were just kind of like a two-man collaboration, but then it grew into like a larger project. Like, where did Judicator come from?
Back in 2010, I met the co-founder of the band, who has since left a couple years ago, Alicia Cordisco. But we met at a Blind Guardian concert, and we hit it off. We had our own respective projects at the time, but we exchanged information, found each other on Facebook and everything. And from there, we just eventually, like a couple years later, after being like social media acquaintances, uh, we just decided to start a project together, and there was no real ambitions or uh, goals beyond, hey, I have all this music laying around. Do you want to try throwing some lyrics and vocals on it? And I was very happy to oblige. And the first album got a surprisingly good response, and so we decided to follow it up really quick with another one because there was no shortage of imagination or desire and motivation. So we went ahead and kicked out another album, 2013, I believe, called Sleepy Plesso. And at that point, there was enough support and interest that we just decided to turn this into an actual legit band as opposed to a sort of garage band project. And at that point is when we brought on Jordan, who's been on with us for almost the entirety of the band's history.
Yeah, no, that's great. You guys have already got what is it, 5 albums? Which I was surprised at when I took a look. So it looks like you guys have been very busy. You said you met at a Blind Guardian concert when you were starting the band with your other collaborator. I like I said, I would probably explain. I would usually describe it as power metal, but I know the the descriptions can get a little constraining. But how would you describe the band for people who haven't heard you guys before?
That's funny because we do generally get clumped in as power metal, but with a couple of exceptions, we don't really fit the power metal tropes and sounds, I guess. Um, yeah, I would say we're sort of a fusion between power, speed, and prog. What do you think, Jordan?
Yeah, I kind of agree, and that's one thing that I love about being in a band is that all of us come together with so many different influences. And Alicia, I was friends with her since we were 15, and we were in multiple bands, different projects of death metal, melodic death metal, thrash, and then the power metal thing came up, and I was asked to be in it, and it's just awesome where everybody can come in with their influences and just it spits out Judicator. So it's really undefinable, but that's one thing that I truly love about it.
Well, and that's the thing too. Like, I mean, Jordan is a huge fan of like Steven Wilson, and I'm really into like David Bowie and really weird stuff. But we all come together and decide to sort of funnel all of our influences through this prism of metal, and it turns out really interesting sometimes. I mean, this album that we have just completed, which is yet to be released. I almost slipped. It's not announced yet. It will be released this year. We went ahead and got a saxophone solo, and we got a brass section. Like, we just kind of went all out with this album that is coming out this year. So yeah, I think you're really going to see the diversity in musical terms with this next album, especially.
Yeah, like you said, I could definitely feel the kind of the progressive metal stuff in there. It's funny because, yeah, like I said, I got recommended you guys because I was on Twitter, talking about how how I like to work out to metal, and how I really like Striper. And someone's like, "Well, if you like Striper, you're really gonna like these guys." And I listened to you, and you don't sound anything like Striper, but I still loved it. So I thought it was pretty funny. It's like, yeah, that's a pretty different sound, but it's definitely awesome. So. Um, yeah, like you said, doesn't necessarily fit right into any one of those molds, but definitely very enjoyable.
Yeah, and I mean that's kind of a funny thing too. Is we could easily be lumped in with Striper, but we don't sound like them. But there's the commonality of Christian themes. But it's like that's sort of the downside of being hard to pin down, is that you don't end up actually fitting very many places. So pick your poison.
Well, I really like that you guys make some of those, because a lot of times you get into the more proggy metal and it gets really long and boring and you can't really, they repeat too much and that kind of thing. You guys keep it very interesting over 7-8 minute songs on a very regular basis. So I really enjoy that you're kind of, you're doing that right. It's not just long, for the sake of it or experimenting for it. Always seems to have a purpose. It's always going somewhere. Your albums are always themed and telling an interesting story, and that's where I wanted to go to next. One of the things that definitely drew me to your band is I'm a huge history nerd, particularly things like the Roman Empire, the Byzantine Empire, um, and this is something that's kind of a theme throughout a lot of your albums. Can you talk a little bit about kind of the inspirations for some of those albums and why you guys chose that subject matter?
Um, I suppose this requires me taking the mic from Jordan, but
Yeah,
just because
100%.
just because I'm I'm the lyricist and vocalist. But yeah, I mean, King of Rome came about just because we hadn't even come up with this concept of who we are and what we're all about, which is of course now every album we produce is a concept album. Um, but at the time, it was like, man, I love concept albums. I want to produce a concept album, and Alicia was very much of the same mind. And at the time, I was really into Napoleon Total War and Empire Total War, a couple of real time strategy video games. And that interest, of course, led to me falling in love with the movie called Waterloo, with Rod Steiger. And so I was really falling in love with this era of history, and so that's sort of the story behind King of Rome. Um, After King of Rome, we decided to do another album, and we were looking for a concept, and we hadn't yet come up with the idea of sticking mainly to history. But I was I was recovering one morning in the parking lot of a Barnes and Noble after having a party the night before. And I stumbled into the Barnes and Noble because they have a Starbucks in there. And so I got my coffee and I went looking around, just mulling over books. And I found a book called, I think it's called The Iron Empire or The Iron Kingdom. The Iron Kingdom. And it was about Prussia and the rise and fall of Prussia. So from there, I was like, I was already uh, a fan of German culture and language, so it was kind of a shoe in to make the album about Frederick the Great, somebody I had never learned about before. So that was fascinating. I don't know. I could go on in a lot of detail. Depends on how long you want to hear me rant. But yeah, all of these albums seem to have the concept come about in a sort of natural way, and I like that. I like not having too much of a plan. I like to let uh, uh, my unconscious or God or whatever work through me to produce whatever it is I think that we are meant to produce.
Yeah, and it's interesting because there are some bands that do kind of the historical period thing. Obviously, like Sabaton, every album's about a bunch of different battles and that kind of thing. But while I love Sabaton a lot, like they are kind of stretching the question: how many albums can you write about World War I and World War II? What I found really interesting about you guys is kind of the periods that you choose, right? Like Prussia, the First Crusade, an album about Belisarius. Like these are very particular periods of history. Ones that, like, again, like these are not the greatest hits of your high school history class. These are pretty deep pulls. These are very particular types. Why are you choosing these in particular? Are these areas that have always fascinated you? I know you totally explained kind of the running into the book in Barnes and Noble, but some of these other ones is that something you have a connection to or something you just stumbled upon?
Well, I mean, there we've come up with sort of a template for how we want to produce albums, and it's not something that is set in stone, but I think that it's a good enough template because you have King of Rome and Sleepy Plesso, which match fairly closely in terms of like period and the kinds of figures that you're likely to encounter. So it's like Napoleon and Frederick the Great have a lot of similarities. And then we have At the Expense of Humanity, which is completely different, totally something other. And then we return to the First Crusade and then Belisarius and the reconquest of the former Roman territories. Now, those are on a surface level similar, but they're separated by what, like 600 years or something? It's a while. But the the straw that I'm going to grasp at is um, the reconquest of Justinian has been referred to as a sort of proto crusade. But anyway, so I just think it's kind of neat. Oh, and so the album that we have completed now is not historical. It's again kind of related to death and life, and it's sort of a personal story as well. I don't want to give it away, but I just kind of like this idea of doing two albums that are historical, which relate to each other, and then one album that's totally out of left field. Because history is something that's really fascinating. And like you were pointing on, I think for so many people, their experience with history is dry and like they're forced into it. But really, like history at its best is no different than a Marvel movie. And what I mean by that is you are receiving information in the form of storytelling. And the information that you're receiving from a Marvel movie is what would you call it? Like empty carbs. It's
Hmm.
trivial. It's shallow, but I think there's so much that we can communicate by retelling these stories in a way that resonates with the average Joe, so to speak. That's something I'm really passionate about is connecting with history, representing history to people in a way that they can resonate with it. And that's been really rewarding because I've seen a lot of people uh, say that mission accomplished. I mean, not nobody normally thinks about um, the First Crusade in a nuanced way. Normally, people don't even know about the Byzantine Empire. People probably have heard about Napoleon, and most people, at least outside of Germany or Europe, have not heard. Most Americans, anyway, haven't heard of Frederick the Great. So I love popularizing history.
Yeah, like you said, I really enjoy that you're turning it into a very narrative form in a way that unfortunately history is so rarely delivered. You get these movies, but again, historical movies, especially today, that can only be over about the same five things, and so it's really nice to get those stories that are really amazing and crucial parts, really, of world history, but just don't get told. To have them put together in a kind of a lyrical and narrative fashion. This is what history used to be, right? Like, this is how history was told before it became an academic discipline. And so it's wonderful to kind of see it return. And like I said, other bands are doing it, but I think you guys are doing it about topics and periods that are very unique and kind of they kind of, like you said, they sit well together, the first two albums and then album 4 and 5. But let's go ahead and stop and talk about the one that's not like the others, since you said the new one might also be more like at the expense of humanity. Because the first couple times I listened to it when I was working out, how it is, you're doing stuff and you don't quite focus on all the lyrics and stuff, and it was, I think, like halfway through the second or third listen that I really started picking up. I was like, oh, this one's different, but I didn't really notice, and then picking up the themes on it. Obviously it's a very personal album. What kind of drove you to write At the Expense of Humanity? Because I think after listening to it more, it's really great.
Yeah, like I have said a couple times before, we didn't really settle into accepting that we were primarily a historical band at this point. And so I was coming up with an original. I was like, where can we go from this? We did King of Rome and Sleepy Plesso. What do we do next? And I thought of this original story that would be influenced by the Hellraiser movies. And it was a fun idea. And I was actually thinking about this the other day. Like, would At the Expense of Humanity have been as impactful if it had been about a story influenced by the Hellraiser movies? Probably not. But I just, part of the thing is, like, I couldn't get it to work. I couldn't get the story to work, and I was at my wit's end. And I was listening to one of the songs that was written, because Alicia would write all of the music and then send it to me, and then be like, "All right, here, go hog wild." And so I was listening to some of the songs, and I'm like, it's just so moody and so melancholic. Like, what in the heck can I do with this? And I don't even really remember how the idea came to me, but the idea did come to me to say, hey, maybe we make this album about my experience with my brother dying of cancer. Because there was a lot. I just realized that there was a lot that I had swept under the rug, and I had not really emotionally processed it. And I think producing this album was sort of my way of doing that.
Yeah, and you can definitely hear that. It's a very powerful album. It's especially, I'm someone who lost a wife to cancer very young, and so it's something that there's a lot of truth and a lot of interesting discussions and issues that people who haven't been close to that kind of thing might not know about, but so many people have been close. It is something that touches so many lives. It is something, unfortunately, today that people are kind of more familiar with, maybe than many people would think. And so I think it's something that a lot of people, it's just an enjoyable album. Like, it's not for people who are listening, it's not like a slog or anything. It's a great album, a lot of energy in a lot of the songs. But if you're listening to like the next level of it, it also speaks to a lot of experiences. And I was very surprised, after having listened to your other albums and their themes, to have that one come out of nowhere was very surprising, but a very good surprise.
Yeah, the album is a bummer, to be sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm extremely proud of it. And I will say that the next album is nowhere near as much of a bummer. In fact, uh, it kind of addresses At the Expense of Humanity in a number of ways.
Well, it's got a horn section, so it's got to be a little
Yeah.
more upbeat than this one. Absolutely. So, now that we've talked a little bit about the where the band came from and kind of the things that you guys are looking at. Oh, I wanted to ask you one more thing because I wasn't sure. So I know that it's gone from kind of the recording project to the actual band here over the last few albums. So are you guys touring? Are there plans to do that? I know you said the new album is going to be coming out hopefully within the year, so obviously you guys are working on that, but are there any plans for that kind of thing?
We had plans, but then COVID hit.
Yeah, yeah.
And so we've just been kind of waiting and watching because we've seen it so many times where, oh yeah, we're going on tour, but then it ends up getting canceled, or it ends up having these uh, restrictions that make you question, is it really worth it if like these are the hoops you have to jump through to make a show happen? There's so much uncertainty, and especially traveling between states, different venues, um, the certainty just isn't there. But yeah, we are focusing this year on producing content. We launched our Patreon, which has been amazing. We've got a lot of really fun stuff that's already been released on our Patreon, and a lot of fun stuff that's going to be coming out on the Patreon. So if anybody's interested in getting stuff early, or getting sort of behind the scenes stuff, then Patreon is the place to be. But yeah, we have the album coming out at some point this year. We have plans to produce a couple music videos and release those before the album comes out, and um, hopefully we will be doing some touring, at least of the West Coast, next year.
Very nice, very nice. We'll make sure you get that one on vinyl for the vinyl collectors of us
Oh,
out
it will
there.
be.
Excellent. So the next thing I wanted to talk to you guys about was kind of just the state of metal in general, because I definitely want to get your guys' idea on kind of culture and where it's going and how it can be created, that kind of thing. And you often hear that basically like rock is dead, metal's dead, it's not never going to be popular again. It's certainly not the dominant force that it was culturally at different points. There's nowhere for it to go. Obviously you're making metal albums, so you don't believe that, but what do you think about people who are kind of pronounce the death of the genre, or kind of the genre kind of becoming sclerotic? Are there places for metal that to go that are different? Can it grow? Can it return to a big cultural force? What do you think is the future kind of for metal in those ways?
I'm actually kind of curious to get Jordan's thoughts on this, because while Jordan does like metal, I don't know if he's really like a metalhead, you know?
Yeah, I'm probably the biggest poser in the band, to be quite honest. Uh, I love metal, right? I grew up on it. My dad was a huge metal fan. Listened to Typo Negative when I was young, like really young, being woken up to it, and um, it's just something that is kind of ingrained in me. And as I became a musician really young, I, got into jazz music and got into a lot of different genres where I appreciated the talent more than anything. And that actually drew me back to metal because there's so much talent in almost any genre of metal that if you're a musician or you appreciate the musicianship of writing or playing or just the skill that it takes to do that, you appreciate it at a different level and you just love all different types of music. But as far as it being dead, I think it's all about perspective, right? It's like what you surround yourself with. Like I would probably say that it's definitely not dead in my opinion. I feel like my fiance is a little more listens a little bit more mainstream music and being a musician, I hear a lot of influences, right? You get a lot of punk rock influences. You get a lot of different just like metal riffs and some weird mainstream songs, in my opinion, right? So it's everybody's opinion and perspective, but I don't think it's dead. I don't think it's ever going to be like Europe big in the US. But I think that there will always be a place because it gives, especially young people, I feel like it gives them a place to express themselves no matter, what they're feeling at that time of coming of age or figuring out who they are, if that makes any sense at all. But that's my 2 cents on it.
No, absolutely it does. What about you, John? What do you think?
Yeah, I think that there is a place for metal in the broader culture for sure, but I personally don't want that place to be too big. There is the fear, on my part at least, that if anything becomes too mainstream, then it becomes corporatized and it sort of loses its soul. And I feel like we're kind of already seeing that in the metal culture. And that may just be a reflection of culture in general. You know, the more culture or society leans this way, the more people you're going to have who are this or that way. And kind of like what Jordan was saying, you know, metal is ultimately it's so dynamic, so broad, so diverse. But when you think about metal, normally you think about sort of individualism, standing out, giving the middle finger to authority, attitude, this kind of thing. And you know, the joke is old hat at this point because it's been made so many times. But you know, Rage Against the Machine became Rage for or on behalf of the machine. You know,
Yeah.
so you know, I think metal is safe. But I think you know you're going to see more of this, and I don't know if it's a phase or if it's just the new direction. But the other thing I would say is as far as where metal fits into the broader culture. Um, I think as the years go on, because metal is kind of gatekeeperish, and that is good in a lot of ways, I think, and it also has its drawbacks. But um, you already see such a divide. You've got the classic heavy metal crowd, and then you've got the forward thinking um glam metal, and then new metal or grunge metal. Like there's always a new kind of spin on metal that's resisted by the classic metal crowd. And so I don't know. I was just having this kind of epiphany a little bit ago about this, and I've commented on it before. I'm really curious to see how it pans out. But I see there's chat going on about jazz or whatever in the live chat. I don't know. I haven't read it, but I just saw the word jazz. And but
Mm.
so what is jazz nowadays? There's definitely an underground following for jazz. There's definitely jazz fans. They're a minority for sure, but what you have that's really cool, and I would definitely recommend people go to one if they haven't already, jazz festivals. Um, Jazz festivals, man. And so I can, you know, just hypothesizing, mulling over ideas, but it's like maybe this is the way that metal will eventually go. You know, there's uh so, some metal bands out nowadays, they're like we are heavy metal, and they dress like from the 80s. They dress in that same kind of way. And you know, it's kind of costumey. I don't know. It's fun, but I can just imagine or picture metal culture taking on that same kind of uh, approach or whatever, just being like jazz festivals.
Well, that's a very interesting thing that has happened to music because a lot of this stuff, a lot of, all these different art forms, all these different styles of music, of course, they came from kind of regionalities. They came from enclosed cultures. They came from different experiences, different scenes that gave them those flavors and that kind of thing. One of the reasons I think that a lot of these subgenres kind of bled out of music, be it jazz or I'm a big bluegrass fan as
Mm,
well. Like these things in many ways lost some of their particularity because the culture kind of melted together. Everyone had access to everything all the time, which you think would create more diversity in sound, but in a lot of ways actually just ends up kind of homogenizing everything, right? Because there's like a best way to get the most listens and the most eyeballs or the most ears in this case. And so because of that, like you hear people grab a bit of this, a bit of that, and then it reminds me of kind of mixed martial arts. If at first when you had the UFC, it was the karate guy versus the judo guy versus the wrestling guy versus the Brazilian jiu-jitsu guy, and eventually it all just melted into one particular fighting style that was the best for what it was. And it feels like a lot of these genres, they lost their mainstream cultural power, but we're almost seeing them, like you said, you have these festivals and these other things where they kind of they have to break away and kind of restart their own small culture again before I feel like they can go in a new direction, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, that's a really interesting sort of elaboration off of like what I was talking about. That's really interesting.
So let me ask you this. I liked what you said about Rage Against the Machine there, because you're right, that joke's been made 1,000 times, but it's really true, right? Like when I go to a venue, when I go to a place that's got like just like local bands and that kind of local metal bands or that kind of thing, the first thing you see is like all the most politically correct stuff you can imagine. It's all inclusive. It's all kind of parading the new thing. Like it's got the same posters you would see in an HR department, but the wall's a little dirtier.
I'm sorry.
But it's true, right? Like you go to
I'm
these
sorry.
you go to these places, and it used to be all these guys who are like, oh, screw the man, we like Satan and beer and middle fingers. And then like now you show up to the same places that are supposed to be hosting this music, and yeah, like Betty from HR would have the same opinions as all right guys, we're gonna rock and be super inclusive. So in this kind of scenario, what is the opportunity for people who are trying to do something different artistically? Like you have this constraint, obviously culturally, of like what's acceptable, and I don't think music needs to be overtly political. I think that dates it and gets exhausting at points. But I think there is like a cultural standpoint that these things come from, and I think it's clear when sometimes they don't come from the same place as kind of the mainstream stuff that's happening right now. What do you think about this kind of conformity in metal, the social conformity, and the possible options for people who want to move outside of it artistically?
I don't know about Jordan. I'm kind of chomping at the bit, and I want to hear what Jordan has to say because him and I have a lot of similarities in thought, but also a lot of differences.
No, you take it first, and I'll give my opinion.
Okay. First off, part of I was already smiling, but what made me lose control was I pictured at like a heavy metal concert, one of those posters with the kitten on the clothesline said "Hang in
Just
there."
hang in there, man.
It's like in South Park, they have those like stupid generic posters on the around the school. I pictured like that kind of stuff. Um, yeah. So I think there's 100% a place for political subject matter in metal. I think there's definitely a place for it. Judicator is not a political band. I'm all right and accurate saying this on behalf of the band, but I feel like we're kind of trying to encapsulate what is, at least for us, that classic 1990s childhood attitude, which is like, hey man, it doesn't matter what color you are, where you're from, let's all come together. We're Americans and USA, USA. Like I think we're very much of the mindset that um, we want to bring people together, and that sounds cliche, but hey, it's true. So yeah, I mean, we generally as a band try to that's not who we are, but there are other bands who it is. I forget some of your questions, so
No,
maybe
that's okay.
Jordan.
I was asking for, seeing as a lot of, like I said, a lot of metal seems to have taken on kind of the politically correct stance. So a lot of it has got a lot of mainstream signaling and themes. What does it look like for someone who's creatively trying to do something different
Ah,
outside of that?
well, so you've got kind of a vanilla way or a safe way of playing with those boundaries, and I think that's what Judicator does sometimes. The most potentially polarizing example is with our album, The Last Emperor. That whole thing started with a book called Crusading and the Idea of Crusading, I think is the name of the book. But it was very interesting. I just got the book because I'm like, you know what? There's so much uh, cultural baggage about the Crusades, but what's really the case? And so I read that book and was fascinated. And ultimately, to get a little personal, that's kind of that was one piece of the puzzle to like what started opening me up to Christianity, actually, which led to my conversion.
Oh
but
wow.
yeah, so I mean, that album, the Last Emperor, it takes the perspective of the Crusaders, but it is also critical of the Crusaders, and it offers some critiques of Islam and the Arab countries at the time. It gives both sides a fair shake. And when you're dealing with a very charged subject matter, nuance is not something that is going to be met kindly with. So, that's an example of, I think, how to do it relatively safely. But if you're talking like how to be individuals in a more open way, um, I don't know what that would look like really, because I don't really see a lot of it. When you do see it, it usually ends with either a Twitter apology and utter cancellation, or maybe redemption. But it's you don't see a lot of that. I don't know. I'm still curious on Jordan's thoughts.
Yeah, let's definitely hear that for sure. Go ahead, Jordy.
I really don't have, oh man. First off, I want to tell you that I'm offended because I worked 2 years in HR. So, um, other than that,
Did
it's
you
hard
have the
for,
kitten poster? Have you taken it to a metal shop?
that is neither here nor there. But one thing that I'll say, and it's like it's harder for me to speak just because being able to be creative is just hitting different things and everything, you know what I mean? But um, we like John said, Judicator is more safe just because the type of topics that John writes about is it's either historical or something personal that he's gone through in the past. So I could see if you're writing about current events or anything like that, it could get a little bit harsh or harder to be creative with it. But um, I guess it's just a really hard question to answer. I guess just for me, anyways.
Well, one of the nice things about the historical writing, though, is it's kind of like science fiction in that you can address things that are topical, but you don't have to hit it head on because it's in a different place in a different time. So you can address a lot of those issues and you can speak to them, but it doesn't have to be maybe so harshly current, which is
Yeah,
also good because it tends to be more timeless that way.
yeah, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, you can insert a lot of dog whistles that way.
That's right. So we'll be looking forward to the concept album about the Spanish Civil War. We'll be carefully awaiting that one.
I had the thought, because I've seen actually as I've acquired more Catholic friends, I've heard more nuanced takes on the Spanish Inquisition. And I thought, man, wouldn't that be a challenge? Let's make an album about the Spanish Inquisition.
There you go. Well, it's like the King Diamond has that one about I think the French Inquisition. If you listen to it the right way, it's just the story of a heroic French priest, doing his job. So
Yeah, the Inquisitors were the good guys. That's the story the challenge that I want to try to tell.
yeah. It will definitely make for a more interesting attempt, to be sure.
Hey man, we'll get publicity.
Yeah, certainly we'll get publicity. Yeah, so let's see. We covered that. One more thing before I start taking some questions from the audience, because I've got some already, and they're definitely interested to hear kind of your opinions on a few things music wise. But it was very funny because when I reached out, I don't think John knew who I was at all. But when he checked on the YouTube channel, he's like, "Oh, you've had Charlemagne on. I got to listen to this." And that was just very funny to me because Charlemagne's a good buddy of mine, and I did not expect you guys to be familiar with maybe Moldbug at all. We don't have to spend a lot of time on it, but John, turns out you know a little bit about Moldbug. You're familiar. How did you run into kind of Curtis Yarvin?
Well, speak of the devil, it was actually through Charlemagne's YouTube channel, and so that got me into his YouTube channel, and from there I started reading his blog, The Gray Mirror, and yeah, it's been really interesting to sort of see this Dark Enlightenment movement grow. When I first got into it, I was like, man, are these ideas super fringe or something? And I guess they are, but um, it
But
it
now Curtis
it
Yarvin's been on Tucker Carlson, so
I
how
know
fringe can
it.
it be? Yeah.
Well, and you start seeing more mainstream figures adopt terminology like the cathedral,
Mm-hmm.
and so it's been really interesting. I mean, I don't expect that the United States is going to turn into a monarchy anytime soon, but who knows? Maybe we'll get lucky. But it I'm just curious to see what, like, maybe 10, 20 years from now, looking back, if we'll say, man, this actually was kind of a movement that ended up creating a political party, or I don't know, but it's awesome.
Well, if it works, it won't create a political party at all. But yeah, I
Yeah.
hear you. I hear you. But yeah, no, like I said, I just thought that was very cool. That was very funny for my two worlds to collide there when you made reference to that. So I thought I'd mention that real quick. So let's go to our chats here. Guys, if you have any questions for the guys from Judicator, feel free to throw them in. I've got a couple of super chats, so we'll go there first. But if you have just general questions, you can also drop an at reply in the mentions there, and I'll try to get to it here. So Barrel Roller, thank you for your donation, sir. It says, what are your favorite black metal albums? Been trending that direction despite anti-Christian themes, and would love to hear your recommendations. Any black metal that you guys enjoy? Anything you'd recommend?
Jordan?
Oh God. When I wa- when we were young, right? We were into the traditional mayhem. So that's pretty much all I can really say. And then Alicia and I did a black metal song in under the name of Deja Velen when we were about 16 years old, to kind of play a trick on one of our black metal friends, and that's about it. I like the music, I like the influences, but I guess I'm a little bit ignorant to that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not the biggest black metal fan. Not that I have anything explicitly against it. It's just not the genre of music that appeals to me very much. I can appreciate Immortal. There's it. I think Belphegor has a lot of material that I really like. That's about as much as I could say. 1349 is pretty cool.
Yeah, it's also not quite my wheelhouse. I like death, but I guess that's by definition death metal. But at least it's related.
Yeah.
Um,
Uh,
but I tend to prefer the shrieking vocal to the growling vocal. Um, so that's my particular. I tend to prefer that. I tend to prefer power metal and that kind of thing. But at least you got a few recommendations there, Barrel
yeah,
Roller.
if you're into black metal, our guitarist that we had on the Last Emperor, Michael Sanchez, he played some leads on. Look up his name. He has a few projects, and he's a huge black metal fan.
Pain Patterns,
So
isn't it?
well, Pain Patterns, and he has a couple more projects that he did that he actually did vocals on. So it's really cool material. So just look up Michael Sanchez. That he's probably somewhere in our Instagram or Facebook.
It's also worth noting. I mean, I shame on me for forgetting, but our co-founding guitarist Alicia, she actually just released an album that is, I think it would fall under the black metal category, wouldn't it? It's Wraith Storm. So you could check out Wraith Storm. Just released a new album. It's one song that's like 37 minutes long, and there's no guitar. It's just bass, vocals, and drums. So that could that could be good for you too.
All right, let's see. We've got restoring order here for $10. Thank you very much. Says great show, guys. Looking forward to checking out Judicator. Question: when you go to Guitar Center, does your guitarist play Enter Sandman intro while looking around to see if anyone is impressed? You guys ever just go into Guitar Center to see
So,
if you can catch some
um,
attention?
actually, yeah, I used to do that when I was younger. So Alicia and I would go into Guitar Center when we were younger, and because I was actually um, the second guitar player, and in our original band Grimmest, and we used to play, Crystal Mountain by Death, not Metallica, but Crystal Mountain, and then Symbolic probably was the two that we would try to jam out on some amps that we couldn't afford.
Yeah, definitely the place to enjoy some gear that you may not be able to secure otherwise, right?
100%, 100%.
Go there after eating a PB&J sandwich and just play on their bass.
Very nice. I know. I guess I was going to ask you guys what's next, but I guess we kind of already you kind of let slip a little bit there that we've got a new album to look forward to. So I'll definitely be looking for that. Is there anything else that people should check out? Places they can find you? Any other projects or things you want them to be looking for?
Yeah, I mean, I would say check us out on Facebook, on Twitter. We just started a Rumble account. But really, like, above all, if you like what you hear and you want more, I would say check us out on Patreon. Even if it's $1, that gets us mileage, man. And we're really working hard to put out fun, interesting, engaging content. So yeah, I mean, check us out. We're on Bandcamp. Just if you want us, you'll find us. But yeah, Patreon's the place to be.
Yeah, I can highly recommend "Let There Be Nothing." It's a truly excellent album. Enjoy it quite a bit. Everybody who I know who has heard it has pretty much instantly loved it. So I can highly recommend. Oh, we got another chat here. Machiavellius to go says, "Is Helter Skelter the first heavy metal song?" That's a good question. I like that one. What do you guys think about it?
I don't know. I can definitely, if somebody made that argument, I think you could probably make a good argument for it. I think heavy metal's generally said to be Black Sabbath
Black
and Judas
Sabbath, right?
Priest.
Yeah. Well, I got to say the Motley Crue cover of Helter Skelter is excellent. I like that one a lot. But yeah, I would go with a lot of people and say that first Black Sabbath album continues to hold up. It's still really creepy despite being extremely old
Yeah.
at this point. So amazing that you made something like that still lasts and still is, I think, like I said, is set apart from a lot of the intentionally creepy like type metal today. Like that one still sticks with you.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't know. I mean, kind of elaborating maybe to the point where it's contrived, but it's just like you brought up like Satan and death and stuff, and it's like that has become such a overused cliche trope at this point that that's what it is. Like when heavy metal bands sing about like Satan and death and evil and stuff, it's like you're not evil. Like, there's nothing edgy or scary about you. You're totally like safe, man. And so it's really, I mean, that's kind of the funny thing too, is like as culture has shifted one way, I think it's actually more brave and interesting to sing about stuff that's maybe spiritual or positive, you know. Um, it's like, as far as Christian metal bands go, you've got Theocracy. That's it, basically. You might be
Mhm.
able to argue that Judicator fits into that category, but we try to avoid, you know, we don't want to be known as a Christian metal band, but, you know, there's certainly themes in there. So I would say, like, it's amazing what Black Sabbath started. And at the time, it was so unique. You know, they wanted to play slow, heavy, funeral rock. And I think, yeah, I mean, that kind of gets back to the point of like how to stand out in the metal world in this day and age. And I think that's something that a lot of metal and rock musicians should ask themselves. How am I actually setting myself apart from the mainstream? Not just in terms of your musical sound, but in terms also of like your voice, your presentation, your song material, your attitude. And I'm not saying be contrarian either, but I'm just saying that, like we were saying, Rage on Behalf of the Machine, if some of these people took a step back and realized what safe, uncreative types they were really being, they might reflect. That's about it.
Yeah, no, and like I said, I think you guys are definitely doing something different, something I really enjoy. So I encourage everybody to go ahead and check out. Like I said, I put the Twitter and the Bandcamp page in the links in the description, guys. But make sure you check out some of the stuff. Give everything a listen. It's really excellent. You'll really enjoy it. Want to thank both John and Jordy again for coming on. Want to thank everybody who joined us tonight, everybody who chatted. If it's your first time stopping by my channel, please make sure to go ahead and subscribe and all that stuff. And really appreciate everyone for coming out. Had a lot of good questions. So as always, guys, I'll talk to you next time.
Thank you so much for having us